Hi everyone, welcome to BRICS Briefs, your weekly dose of all things BRICS, served up by me, Clive. Each week we're diving into the hearts of the BRICS nations, bringing you fresh news, insights and happenings that are shaping our world. In this week's episode, we'll be looking at BRICS expansion with a highlight on Australia. That may be a little bit unexpected. Let's take a look. So I just wanted to mention that our last video we did was about BRICS expansion. I think you'll find it very interesting because there is a list and we've ranked them, so you see the highlighted one there, and you can have your own guess. It's a bit of a game for you. So alright, let's get on to our first one. So we had some controversy because here in Australia we've got issues, okay? But this was by Sputnik, a Twitter post, and I'll just read it here. It's titled, "Australia proposes new law to ban Russians from the country." That's a little bit provocative, but let's read it. Under the new legislation, the Australian Immigration Minister would be able to impose a ban on visa applications from any country he deems detrimental to national interests. The law would not only apply to asylum seekers or economic migrants, but even prospective tourists. The Albanese government has, that's the current Prime Minister, the Albanese government has reportedly singled out nations from Russia, Iran, Iraq, Zimbabwe and South Sudan for an entry ban. The official pretext is that these countries allegedly don't cooperate with Australia's attempt to deport their nationals who were unsuccessful asylum applicants. Australian opposition parties have criticised the rushed legislation for being transparent as a brick, botched and chaotic, while incurring the risk of inviting unintended consequences. Meanwhile, Australia's Human Rights Law Centre has denounced the bill as a bold form of discrimination based on nationality. The Albanese government has been a stalwart supporter of the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, providing the Zelensky regime with weapons and funding. The Australian Prime Minister is one of the few world leaders who notably declined to express his condolences to Russia following the Caracas City Hall terrorist attack last week. That's not very nice, is it? So this is, it's sort of stirred up. It's like, okay, we're banning Russia. Well, let's go a little bit deeper, okay? So this is an article from Visa Guide, and so their interest is in tourists, in people migrating, and giving them information, attracting people to look at their articles. So this is a post on March 28th, 2024, so that's only a couple of days ago. So titled, "Australia's deportation bill could be used to ban entire countries' citizens from obtaining visas." So highlighted here, the bill in question may impact applicants from Russia, Iran, Iraq, South Sudan and other countries. Okay, we got that. Reportedly, the bill aims to criminalise non-citizens in Australia who refuse to cooperate with a forced return process, with an exemption for refugees facing persecution in their home country. So it's where they've failed to meet the criteria for asylum seeking, and their home country doesn't comply with the Australian process of deporting them back to their country. So reportedly, the bill allows the government to label any country as a removal concern country if it won't take back its citizens sent from Australia. This means a total ban of visa applications for people from that country. So it goes on a little bit more, but basically that's what's going on from what I can see, is that the Australian government is having issues deporting people after their applications fail. But what Sputnik is saying in their Twitter is that Russia, it seems to be obviously that it's Russia being one of those countries that has difficulty with, which we don't really know whether they do or not, is Australia's going to ban people from Russia because that country does not comply with the deportation process. So in a way, Sputnik's sort of right. They're saying, well, this is going to use to ban people from Russia, because it can be. Because if you see in that, it's actually saying it's at the discretion of immigration. So I don't know. What do you think? Your comment. We know we have a lot of viewers from Australia. So I'm from Australia, obviously. So please comment. Tell us what you think. What do you reckon? Maybe there's some people in our audience who are from the immigration department and can say without making trouble for their work. All right, let's continue. So still on this subject, I just wanted to give a bit of context of Australia. So this is from 2016-2017. This is a diagram of the financial system. This is a world financial system. So although this actually is detailing Australia, the departments or the parts of the Australian financial system, the Australian Council of Financial Regulators, the Reserve Bank of Australia, so the Central Bank of Australia, APRA, Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, the Commonwealth Treasury, that's the actual government treasury, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, so they regulate investments and corporations. Although this is showing Australia, this is actually every country. So in every country you would have the same types of functions in that country, departments or organizations. The rest is the same for every country, right? But obviously Australia being a colony of the Crown, we're obviously more susceptible because we are a constitutional monarchy. They like to call it a representative democracy. I think that's just makes it easier for them, so the population to swallow. Here in Australia, this is what we're dealing with. This is a criminal financial empire. So there's autonomy and then there's sovereignty, right? So this is where there is a difference. So you have autonomy, but ultimately that can be overruled at any time. And that is the system in Australia. It's a constitutional monarchy. And I think people are familiar with what monarchies are. So that's just to give you an idea. So Victoria, if you're not familiar with Victoria, it's the outlined red state there. So this state actually attempted to join with BRICS. So this is an article from the 24th of May 2020 titled "Victoria's BRI Strategy Grows Economic Cooperation and Independence." So in 2020, Victoria, the state, actually, because the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is basically the same thing as BRICS. BRICS is obviously the term we use to denote these particular countries that are cooperating. The Belt and Road Initiative is the underlying initiative. So just so people sort of understand that they're sort of the same thing. One came before the other in the context of history. So I'm just going to read from this article. So under the title Belt and Road, Victoria decided to join, allowing its firms to be put on shortlists for project tenders. Numerous Australian construction and engineering firms have privately engaged with BRI projects, with business forums calling on the government to get on board. The worry now for the Anglo-American elite is that Victoria will learn from China's approach, which could infect the rest of the country, shifting our dependence on the financial establishment that holds the purse strings. Victoria signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the BRI in October 2018 and the BRI Framework Agreement in October 2019. The agreement, which is not legally binding, is between the Victorian State Government and China's National Development and Reform Commission to jointly promote the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. They signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and it was not legally binding, and as I'll read here, that was their intention. The framework document lists principles and mechanisms for cooperation, a roadmap for key areas of cooperation and details for settlement of differences and termination. The roadmap was scheduled to be finalised in the first half of 2020, with a final draft due at the end of March for discussion. Oriented to common prosperity and development, the agreement specifies that projects, trade and investment are to be conducted by private enterprises according to market and international rules. A joint working group will guide and facilitate the cooperation. So again, this is from 2020. The focus of the agreement is practical cooperation to facilitate Victorian participation in Chinese infrastructure projects and Chinese participation in Victorian projects, as well as projects in third countries. Collaboration will include research, innovation, and industrial cooperation, particularly in high-end manufacturing. We definitely need that here in Australia. Biotechnology, agricultural technology, incubator projects, and aged care. That's interesting, isn't it? Aged care. Enhancement of two-way trade and of trade to third-party markets, especially in the areas of agricultural products, food, nutraceuticals, and cosmetics is included. Infrastructure collaboration, propelled by a joint infrastructure accelerator body, will occur in the fields of construction, engineering, new technologies, design, legal, and project financing. So this covers a lot of ground. But if you notice it, this is with China, right? So anything mentioned in Australia about China is very negative here, because as has been said by some, that we're going to be a proxy for fighting in China, which is a very bad thing, since China is our biggest trading partner. So just continuing, in October 2019, Victoria participated in an infrastructure investment roundtable with major Chinese construction companies involved in some of the world's most challenging builds, including the Nanjing Yangtze River Tunnel and the Doha Tower in Qatar. Australia's big build, comprising over 80 billion of projects, including the North East Link, Metro Tunnel, Westgate Tunnel, Melbourne Airport Rail Link, and Suburban Rail Loop, was showcased in order that Victoria's, quote, world-class engineering and design firms be better placed to bid for and win contracts for Belt and Road Initiative infrastructure projects around the world, end quote. So that was from the Premier's office. So just going a little bit more, I'm reading a lot, I apologise, but just to give you, again, we have viewers of this channel who are only listening on audio. So with the roadmap not yet finalised, so it didn't get finalised, it is still early days, but progress and collaboration between Victoria and China includes the following. So I won't read this, but it goes over many of the things that they were trying to cooperate on. And as I read just before, there's quite a lot. So then just ending off, according to the 29 April Australian, which is a newspaper in Australia, Federal Liberal Senator for Victoria, Sarah Henderson, demanded the Premier cancel the BRI agreement, claiming that in the wake of coronavirus, it was, quote, now even more evident that the Belt and Road Initiative is not in our national interest, end quote. Really? Mouthing hollow words that, quote, economic sovereignty has never been more important, end quote. There was no sign that she or any other politician who attacks China and the BRI is about to reverse all the policies that purposely ran down our productive economy and forced dependency on overseas imports and foreign investment. Growing our productive sector through both a radical shift in economic policy and collaboration with all willing partners is the only pathway to true economic independence. That's the opinion of Elisa Barwick, obviously, who wrote this article from the Citizens Party. So this was 2016, 2018, and then, so just going a little bit further, just wanted to show you what was the, because this is important, right? When we're talking about BRICS, what do these countries inside and outside, what are their issues? How can BRICS expand? And this is an example where a state like Texas, like the most southern state of Argentina, which we showed in the video, the governor of Buenos Aires, the state of Argentina, was interested about joining BRICS, right? And they've got some issues there with the new president who was going to join BRICS, and then he said, no, we're not joining BRICS when he came into office. So let me show you that there is some interesting nuances and also issues, and it can be very ideological. So this is an article from Australian Institute of International Affairs on May 2021. So we're sort of going in a bit of sequence here. It's titled Tearing Up the Belt and Road Initiative, Australia's Rejection of China's New Silk Road in Victoria. So I'll read a couple of highlights here. The Australian federal government recently resolved to scrap the Victorian state government's Belt and Road Initiative. So under a subheading, Australia's decision to scrap the initiative. So I'm just going to read, what was the government, how did that actually happen? The implications of the fallout of bilateral relations have, to a great extent, shaped Australia's decision to tear up Victoria's BRI agreement. The amalgamation of economic and security policy in Canberra, that's the capital city of Australia, Canberra, the amalgamation of economic and security policy in Canberra evolving over the last few years was missed or ignored by Victoria. Contributing to the cancellation was also a lack of consultation with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and federal oversight from the Victorian state government upon the, quote, framework agreement prior to its signing in October 2019. So this is at this time, 2021 at this time. The Prime Minister indicated that Victoria's BRI agreement was, quote, inconsistent with the Australian government's policy and not consistent with Australia's national interest. So this is this China thing, right? Again, Canberra deems that the deal is employed by Beijing in an effort to expand its influence in the region and to bypass the federal government. To preclude such a scenario, the foreign interference legislation served two key objectives. The first is to provide the Australian federal government with the mechanism to end the Victorian state government's BRI agreement, as it expressed geostrategic concerns. So they're admitting this legislation about foreign interference was intended for stopping Victoria from joining the BRI. The second is to deter the engagement of foreign governments by Australian subnational governments and actors. In December 2020, both Australian major political parties, the Coalition and Labor, supported and passed the Foreign Relations Bill in Federal Parliament. In April 2021, the Australian Federal Government acted with Foreign Minister Maurice Payne directing the dissolution of Victoria's BRI agreement, concluding that it was, quote, inconsistent with Australia's foreign policy or adverse to our foreign relations. We're talking about our biggest trading partner here, right? The enactment of the Commonwealth's new foreign veto laws is the first of its kind, in that it empowered a country to cancel a signed BRI agreement. There you go. So this is Australia, and this is BRICS. So BRICS and Australia, Australia and BRICS. What's the go? Expansion. This is an article from 2013, April, by the China Daily. Australia should join BRICS, it's titled. Just read a little bit here. As an Australian, I would like to see Australia, along with its ally New Zealand, join BRICS. Well, that's commendable. If Australia becomes part of BRICS, it would ensure peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. That makes sense to me. It is in the best interest of both China and Australia to cooperate in all areas and strengthen their friendship. Why wouldn't you cooperate with your neighbours, right? BRICS is source of new hope for the world. The creation of a BRICS bank would be a wonderful development for the justice-seeking, non-aligned countries. An interesting flavour to this little article. Just a little bit more. Australia has a lot to offer, especially as a bridge between East and West. That is certainly true. Australia is unique in that it is a Western nation that happens to be part of the Asia-Pacific region. Australia should sign a non-aggression pact with both China and the US so that it is not caught in the middle of new developments. I think that is a very good idea. I'm sure many would agree we don't want war, especially with your biggest trading partner. So moving on to now, this is an article from the Australian Citizens Party, because they support and have worked for many years advocating for the new Silk Road, Belt and Road Initiative, BRICS. So they're very interested, and they talk a lot about it. So this is from the 20th of March, just over a week ago. Just read a little bit. There is quite a lot, but this article gives you a good idea of what's happening now. What's Australia thinking now? And there's some references too. So it's titled BRICS Smooths Financial Wrinkles with Win-Win Approach. So they're advocating for BRICS. This is a positive thing. Let's engage. Why? So progress has been marked in the effort of BRICS nations to function independently of the US dollar and ultimately to fashion a new, fair financial architecture desperately needed by the entire world. Continuing, a 29 February editorial in the Business Line section of The Hindu revealed notable success in this endeavour on the part of India and Russia, which is due to the emphasis on long-term investment for mutual benefit rather than short-term profit. The Hindu reported that, quote, the major impediment to settling India's global trade in rupees has been the trade deficits it runs with most countries. Trading partners were thus far reluctant to hold large quantities of rupees which had limited avenues for deployment, end quote. So there's this issue, right? So they're going to trade in national currencies in BRICS. What are they going to do with the other countries' currencies? So I'll continue. In the case of India and Russia, while India has need for large quantities of rubles because of its significant imports of Russian goods, such as oil, Russia, which does not import as much from India, does not have great need for rupees. What do we do? So continuing. The paper reports on the path to resolving this. Russia, which has been accepting the rupee for its trade with India over the last 2 years, has managed to use most of the rupee balance, estimated at about $8 billion US, lying in special rupee Vostro accounts with Indian banks. Not only does this help diversify away from the dollar, it boosts the rupee's position internationally too. That's very important. Russia has reportedly used the rupees held by it to pay for imports from India, invest in infrastructure projects, in equity markets, and for purchase of government securities. Both governments seem to have worked together to identify projects such as the joint venture to make and maintain 120 trains for Indian Railways, or the prospective deal to build 24 cargo ships in Galwa shipyard for operating in the Caspian Sea. What do we do with this money? Oh, let's develop. Exactly. Alright, I'll continue. These projects are elements of joint initiatives that are moving forward rapidly, such as the International North-South Transportation Corridor, which benefit the economies of both nations. With the help of such investments, India's engineering exports to Russia more than doubled in the 9 months to December 2023, according to an Indian exporters group. That's very good. So, reportedly, the Reserve Bank of India has approved similar Vostro accounts for banks from 18 countries. Wow. Including Germany, Mauritius, that's where my parents are from, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and the United Kingdom. The article adds that India and Indonesia are working on, quote, real-time settlement and trading in local currencies, end quote, and use of alternatives to the SWIFT messaging network. Right, this is what we talk about a lot on this channel about BRICS. The financial system, how is that going to work? What are they going to do? This is an example that the Citizens Party here in Australia are highlighting and showing us in this article of how they can do that, and to a very great benefit. So I'll continue. At the current time, observes the piece, it is easier for this to work when the importing or exporting entities are government controlled, but it should be the endeavour of the government to create avenues where the rupees in the Vostro accounts can be gainfully deployed. That can help bring private enterprises on board. This points to the necessity for shovel-ready development projects, such as China envisioned with its Belt and Road Initiative, to deploy excess reserves. Those projects transform idle reserves into credit that fosters growth, providing returns both to the host country as well as the investor nation. This is real cooperation. So I'll continue. There's a subheading, recreating a stable financial order. So this is still on the same theme, right? This is what, and this is important. That's why I'm showing you this article and getting into it a little bit. I'm reading a lot, and I apologize, but I'm showing you this, and from Australia, who was not in BRICS, who tried to get in BRICS and was not allowed to get in BRICS, and they made a law so that they could take them out of BRICS, BRI, the financial system, which is why I showed you that. I'll show it again. This chart showing the financial system. What are we actually dealing with? What do BRICS countries actually have to deal with? And you'll probably find that you've never seen this, and you probably never will see this chart. So I hope you value that to have the proper insight. That's what we're offering here at Think BRICS. We're offering insights from experts, and we're having interviews with experts. Political scientist Andrew Koripko is an example of real experts to give you that real value, the insights. That's why you come to this channel, right? It's not just because you like listening to my Australian accent, I'm sure. My Yobbo Australian accent. So I'll continue. So under the subheading, recreating a stable financial order. Some of the world's best minds are applying themselves to figuring out how to take the next steps in building a new financial architecture, including a broader currency framework that will facilitate trade among a wider array of nations, the settlement of accounts among nations, and mechanisms to support productive investment and to suppress currency speculation. Yes, we want to suppress currency speculation because that's making money from doing nothing, right? This is a very big problem, as you'll see as I go on a little bit here. Goes on, the post-World War II Bretton Woods monetary system was designed to support exactly those functions. But even as it was rolled out, the means of its extinguishment were being put in place. In the course of early moves towards creation of the European Union, which also commenced right after the war, British financiers fashioned new markets to trade the US dollar offshore, opening a massive, lawless and untouchable, that is, outside the jurisdiction of any one nation, speculative realm, which undermined the regulated, fixed exchange rate domain of Bretton Woods. So there's an article which is a reference, and you can bring this up and read yourself. I actually was going to go through this, but it would take quite a long time. You can read it yourself and see this actual history. It says, it's titled, Who Ended the Bretton Woods System and Opened an Age of Infinite Speculation? So there's history there to show you. So just continuing on, one man at the center of discussions about construction of a new financial order, which you would have heard of, between the nations of the BRICS is Sergei Glaziev, Minister for Integration and Macroeconomics of the Eurasian Economic Commission, the policy arm of the Eurasian Economic Union. Glaziev, who has written extensively about the need to reconnect finance with physical economic growth. So the quoting here, we're talking about, the reason this is mentioned about Bretton Woods is because when we're talking about BRICS, we're talking about countries cooperating, that's anti-imperial in nature. So actual countries cooperating, not fighting each other. And when they cooperate with each other, they make deals, which I was just reading before, on different projects. So they have connecting maritime routes, connecting, if they're by land, rail routes, road routes, trade of goods, so long-term trade deals. But when you have one of the main things is infrastructure. So you've got to have development over a very long period. Now, if you borrow money over a very long period, you need to be able to plan for that. So if you have a very long road or railway, you need to know what's that going to cost. Now, if you don't have fixed exchange rates, then how can you do an investment over a very long term? You don't even know how much is that going to cost, right? So this is why the Bretton Woods system, one of its main fundamental principles was to have fixed exchange rates. And that was destroyed by the British Empire with speculation. So they're taking, I don't mean to go into it too much, but they were taking the US dollar, which was part of the Bretton Woods system, to fix the currencies, so there was fixed exchange rates. So they were taking that and then they were destroying that. They were subverting that, which eventually ended up ending the Bretton Woods system, because that was one of the main things, was cooperation and stability of long-term development. So I'm babbling on, I apologize, but I just wanted to try and make that clear. It probably wasn't that clear, but I just wanted to underline why we're going through this. So just read a little bit more. The infrastructure for willing nations to trade in local currencies has been established, says Glaziev. Quote, this infrastructure is already in place, allowing us to make payments without using the SWIFT system, end quote. Really? Okay. Under this subheading, busting up neoliberalism, a religious sect. That's a bit provocative, isn't it? So I'll continue. The big topic still to be decided is the form that a new currency, as a unit of international trade, could take. That is, a currency used solely to conduct international trade, not to replace national currencies. Glaziev confirmed that, quote, we have reached a new model in our talks, end quote, but it is not yet at the policy stage. In general terms, he confirmed that either a new international digital currency to be used in foreign trade would be set up, or the same end could be achieved by digitizing local currencies. A new currency, he explained, would operate as an index of commodities and national currencies of the countries involved in order to create stability, right? So stability of the currencies so that they can be used for long term. As part of that, he revealed establishment of mechanisms to determine commodity prices to prevent Western speculation are being considered. Quote, it's impossible to make any strategic planning for economic development if you do not control prices of basic commodities, end quote. Now, your libertarian will say, controlling prices, right? This is, anyway, I won't go too far, but I'm going to read this particular part here. So, commodities would be priced based on long-term state-to-state contracts, rather than on speculative futures exchanges, right? Not the free market. The free market is you should know your history. So I'll continue. Glaziev explained in another interview, this time with geopolitical analyst Pepe Escobar, published by Sputnik on 28th of February. Glaziev highlighted the role of the BRICS New Development Bank in developing the new financial infrastructure, foreshadowing the possibility of an international conference with the draft of an international treaty. The NDB could be reorganized to become more than an ordinary international development bank. The central banks of BRICS nations, however, have been a major obstacle, he noted, with their insistence that new arrangements maintain the role of the dollar. No surprise there, right? This is a central banking system. This is the criminal financial empire. Continuing. Focusing on his own country, he elaborated, "Here in Russia, we promote the discussion via papers, conferences, seminars, but there's still no political decision on introducing this mechanism, even on the BRICS agenda. The proposal by our team of experts is to include it in the agenda of the BRICS summit next October in Kazan." Well, it's coming. The problem is the Russian central bank is not enthusiastic. I'm not sure the Ministry of Finance understands how serious this is. The president understands. I personally promoted this idea to him. But the chairman of the central bank and ministers are still thinking in the old IMF paradigm. So I'm just going to comment here and say, the president of the Russian central bank, I've heard said that she has some history. I'll leave it at that. Indicating that the NDB should push the agenda forward, Glaziev reported that former Brazilian president and current head of the NDB, Dilma Rousseff, was, quote, rather enthusiastic when presented with the proposal, but she has not had the opportunity to follow up. To follow up with Rousseff. Apologies. Discussions at the highest level are required, he insisted. A political decision is needed. Yes, it is political. It is not free market, private enterprise, right? When you're talking free market, the history of the free market, not the fair market, where responsible governments who have citizens participating in the political process, you have responsible governments actually making sure that producers of products and services actually at least are paid parity, at least. Now, when you have things that are really exacerbated or things that are really important to the country, basic, essential things, then that needs to be managed. You can't have... The free market came from the British East India Company, okay? The Dutch East India Company. That was the free market. That was a private, massive slave trading as well, private consortium that was promoting free trade. Now, that's what they called free trade, right? Looting and dumping. Okay, I'll continue. The neoliberal status quo, which many have accepted by default, must be busted up, Glaziev added. People have been educated in the paradigm of financial equilibrium, totally libertarian. They don't care that prices are manipulated by spectators. They don't care about volatility of national currencies. They think it's natural, but it's a kind of religious sect. Religious sects don't create innovation. So I think that was very important, and I'll just read this last part here. Nonetheless, following a meeting of BRICS finance ministers and central bank governors in Sao Paulo, Brazil, on 27th of February, Russian Deputy Finance Minister Ivan Jabovskov told Sputnik, quote, "We are already a big BRICS family of 10 countries. Most countries supported the fact that it is necessary to build new mechanisms of settlements and shared the experience of developing digital currencies by central banks, the experience of building platforms and participation in trials of various platforms." So they're testing stuff. What's going to work? What's not going to work? Let's look at history. What did work? Bretton Woods. That worked for a long time. Why did it stop working? Right? This is actually investigating and looking at it. So you do need to know your history. And continuing, Chebeskov said he had brought up the Russian idea of a unified digital platform, which he described as a technological gateway for the unification of both digital currencies from central banks and national systems of financial messaging, with software created to facilitate these transfers. Quote, "We propose to simplify in this way interactions between banks and create independent channels for payments and the transmission of financial messages," end quote. This last part here. In an interview in the first issue of a newly created TASS BRICS Bulletin, published 13th of March, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov, who serves as Russia's Sherpa in the BRICS, ruled out the creation of a BRICS currency for the foreseeable future, but did support creation of new payments and settlement systems, quote, "that do not depend upon the whims of the West," end quote. He noted that, quote, "a group of experts, led by the ministries of finance and representatives of the central banks of the respective countries, is working on this issue," end quote. And interestingly, hinted at the inclusion in other formats of representatives of the, quote, "historical West," end quote, in this dialogue. So Russia's Sherpa in the BRICS has said that, he's saying that he doesn't support a new currency, a common currency BRICS. So when you see that on channels, that's not happening, okay? National currencies stabilized for long-term projects and stable trade. That's what the BRICS is doing. So hope you enjoyed this little bit of a highlight into Australia. It's about expansion. So I'm going to end off on a couple of articles here on the same subject of expansion. This is from the 29th of March, just gone. Sergei Lavrov, Russia will invite BRICS Plus partners to summit in Kazan. So TV BRICS have written a little bit of as that they're in Russia. And just a quote here from Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, quote, "A decision to introduce a new category of partner country is being prepared in parallel for the summit. There are about 30 countries in the queue." 30! The association has really gained a global dimension, not only in its agenda and geography, almost all regions are represented, but also in the number of countries. It's very exciting, very positive. So they've got, it's very interesting. So, you got to look around. There's another article from TASS, just sort of showing you that, so this one's from the 30th of March 2024. CIS Secretary General calls CIS SCO BRICS ideal platform to strengthen economic ties. So the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States, and the SCO is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So just a couple of quotes here. The CIS, SCO and BRICS countries make an ideal platform for the development of economic cooperation, in particular for the creation of new industries and the integration of transport and logistics chains, Secretary General of the CIS Sergei Lebedev said. All these issues can be solved when there is a desire, there is mutual respect, and I think that we were guided by these very principles, so we will always find a solution to the most difficult problems. It's a quote from him. So this is optimistic. I think I did, as someone from Australia, I wanted to highlight, what's happening in Australia a little bit, and the fairly recent article by the Citizens Party and their interest. They actually lend us some very professional insight, and I appreciate that, and I wanted to bring it to our audience. So thank you for tuning into BRICS Briefs. If you've enjoyed this dive into the multipolar world and wish to join the conversation, please drop a comment. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Please share our video if you think your contacts or colleagues would find value in it. We're a community. We want people to know about this and be positive and optimistic about the future. It's very important for the children. We would like to receive your feedback and any suggestions. Your engagement is important to us. Don't forget to subscribe for more weekly insights and follow us on our Substack and social media platforms, all linked below. If you'd like to support our work, consider contributing with a Buy Me a Coffee. Your generosity keeps the content flowing. Stay curious, stay connected, stay optimistic, and let's keep exploring together. Ciao!